All right, as we have a quorum present, I declare this meeting of the committee open. I advise that the meeting of the committee will be streamed live to the City of Adelaide website, and the recording will be also published to the internet. Please note that an audio and visual recording is being taken. This means that your presence at and any contribution you make to the meeting may be collected, used, disclosed, or published publicly by the Council, including transferring outside of Australia. Council acknowledges that we are meeting on the traditional country of the Kaurna people of the Adelaide Plains, and we pay respect to their elders past, present and emerging. We recognise and respect their cultural heritage, beliefs and relationship with the land. We acknowledge that they are of continuing importance to the Kaurna people living today. And we also extend that respect to other Aboriginal language groups and other First Nations who are present today. I have received no apologies or leaves of absence. And I think we're actually all here. Anyway, we'll go to 3, confirmation of the minutes. I seek a mover and a seconder to confirm that these minutes are a true and accurate record of the previous meeting. If we could use, yep, thank you. Moved Councillor Kira, seconded Councillor Knoll. Members? Nothing. We'll put that to the vote. Those in favour? Those against? That is carried. That brings us to 4.1, workshop procurement policy review, and we'll go to the directors and the Deputy CEO.
Thank you, Chair. So tonight what we want to share with you is some early thinking in relation to the review of our procurement policy. The purpose of the procurement policy is to achieve the principles set out in the Local Government Act to make sure that we have a procurement policy that at the heart of what it achieves is around obtaining value for money in the expenditure of public money. The last time the policy was reviewed was in 2016, and since Council adopted its strategic plan back in March, you also asked us to consider and implement a sustainable financial, environmental, social and cultural procurement policy. So the intent of this policy workshop tonight, you'll see that there are some case studies in there to see how procurement can be used to achieve your vision of Adelaide as the most livable city in the world. And we're also responding to 2 motions endorsed by Council in relation, one to micro tenders and also to one around social benefit. And we're also making sure that our procurement policy aligns with the existing plans and actions that have already been approved by Council in relation to our stretch reconciliation plan and also our cultural strategy. The new draft policy does maintain our commitment, as I said earlier, to ensuring that value for money is obtained and that public money is wisely spent. That commitment does remain unchanged. And being accountable is a guiding principle also in your strategic plan that does underpin everything that we do. We're hoping that the procurement policy can deliver both value for money for our ratepayers and for our organisation, as well as deliver new benefits not only to our city community but also to our local economy. So, for example, when the value for money proposition and the quality of the service or product are equivalent, a really good example that members might be familiar with, such as Go-Go Events, which delivers premium catering and events while creating paid work for people who are traditionally excluded from the workforce. We have seen some examples in the city recently of having a greater impact in terms of how our ratepayer money is spent. So through our procurement choices and our engagement with suppliers, we do believe there is potential to achieve more and have greater outcomes other than just continuing in the same approach that we've done in the past. So this workshop really is an opportunity to provide feedback, your thoughts, to see how we can make sure that the triple bottom line approach to creating greater business and community value can be achieved. We have Rod Case with us here. Rod joined us at the start of the year and has spent the last few months really getting to grips with our procurement, better understanding of where our money's spent and looking for opportunities to make sure that we do achieve value for money every step of the way. I'll hand over to Rob now just to also say a few words, and then the chair will facilitate gaining your thoughts and feedback through some of the questions. So thank you, members. I'll hand over to Rob now.
Thank you, Deputy CEO. So yes, tonight I'm presenting the proposed new procurement policy for City of Adelaide, and I want to workshop through with you on what is proposed and how that might look, and to hear from you what the outcomes are that you want to see. I think it's great. I think it's really important the way that Council has committed in the strategic plan to deliver a procurement policy to achieve even better outcomes for our spend. So continuing to ensure value for money, but also looking for social value. In the 12 months to 30th of April this year, with some exclusions, we spent $118 million, and that represents a lot of potential to make a difference. It's really exciting to see where this procurement policy might be used and the outcome and the impact that could arise from it. It's not just a policy about paying the cheapest price for a suitable product. It's not just about spend. This is a city developing policy that's involved in looking at how what we spend now will drive overall value both now and later on. And that value can be a financial return on investment, but it could just as much be about improving the quality of life in our city, supporting local businesses, being a good corporate citizen, about attracting new residents. There's multiple ways to define value beyond the dollars, and we can use procurement to influence them all. We're needing to reboot our city's economy as we recover from the impact of COVID-19, and procurement is one of the power levers that we have to deliver this recovery. So to think, what if the money that we spend to maintain and operate the city also delivered a whole range of additional outcomes that improved the experience of city users, benefited the environment, and also boosted the local economy? And so what we're workshopping tonight seeks to provide a framework to deliver those benefits. The new policy aims to deliver on Action 5.07 of the City of Adelaide Strategic Plan 2020 to 24, and it's also framed to comply with the Local Government Act 1999 SA and to achieve the principles set out in Section 49A1 of the Act, which includes obtaining value for money in the expenditure of public money. So with that introduction, I'll hand back to the chair now to facilitate the discussion in relation to the questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Obviously, you've received the papers ahead of time. We're taking them as read. There's no need to go through them. The questions are on your screen, members, so eliciting feedback to any and all of those questions there, and we'll go to Councillor Simms.
Thanks very much, Chair, and thank you to administration for the work on this. I'm excited to see this being discussed tonight. It was back in 2015 I moved the first motion on an environmental procurement policy for the City of Adelaide, and then recently this term pushed for a social procurement policy as well. So I do really welcome the discussion. In terms of addressing some of these questions that you've got on the screen there, I think what you've put forward is really good. The only thing I would say is I think there's a few gaps in terms of looking at the broader social impact and environmental impact, and in particular looking at the businesses with which we develop commercial relationships and their records. So for instance, I would like to see inclusion of criteria under social value that looks at, say, the human rights record of a business. Are we going into business with a corporation that has a really appalling human rights record involved with exploitation of workers and so on overseas? I think that's a relevant consideration for us, and I'd like to see that included in the procurement policy. Looking at, say, environmental factors, are we, when we're entering into contracts, doing so with businesses that are linked in with fossil fuels? because again, I think that undermines the work that we're doing in terms of promoting sustainability. So I'd like to see that being captured in the procurement policy too. And finally, in terms of the local and the micro issue that micro tender issue that former Councillor Abiad pushed, I agree with obviously supporting local business, but I think we need to go a little bit further than that and look at, it's not just about local business, it's also about South Australian made. And, you know, for instance, are we favouring South Australian steel in our public works? If not, I think we should be. You know, it's not just about being a South Australian business or a local business. It's got to be about supporting, you know, South Australian made too, I think. That's very important at the moment, particularly as we're trying to support local job creation and local manufacturing here in South Australia. So I think what's been put forward is good, but there are some gaps for my part in terms of making sure that we're being a responsible corporate citizen, so to speak, in terms of the way we do our business. My view is that you know, money talks, and where the City of Adelaide does its business has an impact. And I'd really like to see us ramp up some of the social and environmental elements of this work. Sorry, that was a very long piece of feedback.
That's all right. Thank you.
You've unmuted me, Deputy Lord Mayor, so I'm
Sorry,
assuming...
I did say shoot.
Oh, sorry, thank you. Look, thank you for bringing this in, and I do know that it's this was a council-led piece of work that the administration is responding to, so I'm pleased that we've got this through in a workshop. And some of you may remember that when it came through last time, I advocated for the inclusion of cultural procurement as well as the social and environmental procurement, so that we are looking across several lenses. This is about value for money, and it is also about efficiencies. So if we're going to spend money and leverage off our procurement, then we can actually have double and triple wins out of it, in the same way that we did with our 100% procurement around renewable or electricity from renewable sources. That was saving us money, that was delivering on environmental impacts, and it also created jobs. And that was a really big win for us, and is something that I believe that we should look to in terms of same cost, better outcomes. So this is really how we leverage what we've already got. And if we can actually look through those lenses of local, I do agree, I think it needs to be local and South Australian, so that we're actually talking to perhaps a wider pool, but certainly the local and the micro tenders that were brought in by Hassan previously, I think is something that we have paid some attention to. But we also need to look at those sort of Aboriginal cultural, social and environmental outcomes. It is part of the Reconciliation Action Plan, and there are some very clear ways that we can do that. So through Supply Nation, which is probably one of the best ways that we can actually look at something that we're already spending money on. How do we get greater efficiency by delivering on multiple purpose? I do actually think that this is part of our, well, absolutely is part of our strategic plan, but it is actually a leadership role in a much broader sense. So we've already proven we can do this. We've already showed, we've demonstrated, we've got some really great case studies around how we've actually used our procurement to deliver on multiple agendas. And I think this is a great way to start. Some of the examples that you've given us are great as a starter to just have a look at where we could go with that in terms of, I don't want to make it too onerous as well. It's not like we're going to, procurement shouldn't be onerous. It's actually how we put in the guidelines with a view that where possible, we are going to really provide, obviously, that value for money, keeping in mind that that is number one. We want the value for money because it's public money, but where we can actually use these lenses and be more mindful through the procurement policy that we can deliver on multiple aspects of our strategic plan. So thank you, and I might come back a little bit later with a few other comments once I've heard from other members.
Thank you, Chair. Procurement is about the stuff that we buy on behalf of ratepayers. So it's about all the goods and services that we purchase from third-party businesses. I just think that we should not be politicizing that purchasing. Buying local where possible is not political. This is something that is a base level accepted by ratepayers and constituents. But our constituents expect us to obtain the best value and the best quality in everything that we purchase. Now, if we want, for example, to, and I can see Rob has got his hand up, he's got to jump in now again, but I'll continue. If we want to assist Indigenous employment further, then we can consider a separate funding amount going towards an existing Indigenous scholarship, for example. This would be transparent, but internally politicising purchasing decisions opens up a can of worms. It's one thing for an organisation to make decisions on hiring internally. It's another for an arm of government to tell businesses how to operate, especially when that becomes the discretion of the administration of a local government, and especially in the current environment. So look, I ask those who are keen to politicise our purchasing, which is what endorsing any of this is, I ask those who are keen to politicise purchasing, just consider this. Once you set the precedent, what happens in future when it's the kind of politics that you don't like, okay, that you don't like? So I'll just leave it at that. One final word to councillors: despite what you've just heard from administration, this is not something that we have committed to in any way. And I'd be very wary of words from the administration that really give the impression that this is something that's done and dusted, because if you pair things away, it's in their interest for us to believe that. So this is not done and dusted. We can consider this further, and it is far more nuanced than is being presented.
Thanks, Councillor Kira. And just before I unmute you, Councillor Sims, I just want to remind the rules on debating. I think it was clear what elicited your hand going up, so I'll be listening to what you have to say very carefully.
I have to add mind reading to your remarkable skill set, Chair. You not only a wonderful chair, you also can read what is in my mind before I've even spoken. So that is impressive. Look, I just, without responding or engaging with the comments made by other speakers, because we're precluded from having open discussion under this new format, I would just make the point to anybody who may suggest that this process is being politicised, that we are a level of government, and so it is totally appropriate for us to set a framework around how we do business and the kind of things that we take into consideration. So I think it's totally legitimate for us to ask these questions. I do make the point, and it's not in response to anything anyone else has said, but do make the point that it's appropriate, of course, not to politicise some decisions, and things like, commissioning artworks and community grants and so on are probably things that should be carved out of the political process. But when we're talking about how we manage our budget, that is something that is well and truly within our remit as elected members, and it should reflect, I think, our shared values. And I would argue things like human rights, things like environmental impact and so on are really relevant matters for us to take into consideration.
Of course, Councillor Sims, you wouldn't be arguing at all, because we're not actually...
Not arguing at all, just making a point.
Just commenting. Yeah, good. Thank you. All right, next up, we have Councillor Abrahimzadeh.
Thank you, Chair. I've got a question of administration. Am I able to ask that now, Chair?
Absolutely.
I remember reading in the papers something around working closely with the Office of Industry Advocate and possibly looking at industry participation plans. Is administration able to comment on the sort of partnership that might take place there, and also will that partnership, if there is a partnership, will that include reviewing the participation plans, or I guess measuring what the proponents have put in their tender submissions?
Okay, thanks, Councillor. So the OIA have reviewed the draft policy and have provided some comment on it. The view that we've taken is that the economic contribution test, or the industry participation policies, a couple of levels of it, can tend to be prescriptive, and so we would like to take a more sort of flexible view of where we place the weightings, particularly for the different aspects that we might want to measure when we're assessing a tender response. And so we've decided to, just move away a little bit from the prescriptive forms that the OIA have developed, but there may still be opportunities, when we're perhaps looking at something which might be supplied from elsewhere in South Australia, or if it's part of something bigger, some larger piece of economic development that we may be able to be part of, that it may be appropriate in that instance to partner with the Office of Industry Advocate.
Okay, and just a follow-up question, just so I understand it properly, does that mean that we'll be doing the measuring in-house? So City of Adelaide procurement team will be doing that measuring?
Yes, that's correct.
Yeah. Okay. No further questions, Chair. Thank you.
Councillor Donovan.
Thanks, Chair. Just one question of administration. Did we consider, we being you, did we look at targets for this at all?
We didn't look at targets. Would be interested to hear people's thoughts on that.
I think we should definitely include targets. I think without that, there's no measurable objective that we're aiming to move toward, and it could be minimal targets. I don't think, if just to set a starting point is fine, but to say, where are we now? Where do we want to get to by the end of, this strategic plan? Where do we want to ensure we are as a base level? And that then also helps with administration, I would think, looking at ensuring that those options are considered. Otherwise, it's easy to go with, previous suppliers. And given the other principles that are in place in this policy as well, there's no reason that targets would have a negative impact on anything else. And in fact, I think based on other research, it tends to be that setting those targets leads to better outcomes. So I'd definitely be supportive of looking at some minimum targets across actioning this policy.
Yes, we did look at ways to measure the outcomes that we get. So, we would be able to work to that.
Okay.
Thank you. Councillor Martin.
Thank you, Chair. Look, I'd like to endorse the comments in regard to targets. There's not much point in having a policy if there isn't a target. And even if it is a small target initially with a graduated increase, then that would, I think, ensure that these goals are established. And I do want to say that I support the use of these levers through procurement to influence behaviours throughout business. And I am mindful that the most successful campaign in the world, which used procurement to bring about a particular outcome, was begun by Australia. In fact, it was a very conservative Australian government in the 70s, which applied bans on procuring goods from South Africa as a means of producing social change that spoke strongly against a racist regime. Similarly, and I note that the practice is widespread, Australian institutions, including banks, are now refusing to invest in companies which are engaged in the production of fossil fuels. Apart from one that the City of Adelaide deals with, and I think this policy will help us to review that in a positive way, I hope. But those kinds of procurement practices are used by not only banks, but construction companies in favouring Australian products, such as Australian steel, which was mentioned earlier. If people can't accept, and I'm talking broadly now, not about my colleagues, but if people can't accept that procurement is part of the way of doing business these days, that is demonstrating not only a commitment to great outcomes for organisations in terms of value for money, but demonstrating moral decency, then that is to ignore what is the norm in society today. That is how business works, or at least that's how the smart end of town works. The silly end still behaves in the same way, but smart business has acknowledged the value of having procurement policies such as these.
Councillor Knoll. There we go. No. Franz, I am trying to unmute you. Is there a pop-up on your screen that you might need to press?
I thought you thought you could handle it on your own, but now anyway. So when we're talking about this quite a bit of when the initial conversation is about ensuring that we have value for money, obviously for procurement. Of course, I also would expect that businesses and that are ethical, and those sorts of tenets through the conversation. I'm just intrigued that we obviously use these sort of lenses to encourage businesses, etc., to be involved in the processes, and to certainly that they are given as much assistance as possible in a competitive sort of environment. Because I think that is very important, because certainly affirmative assistance is okay, but we do have to remember too that we also create disadvantage for other businesses that may have other aspects that we are not measuring for. I'm intrigued with setting of targets in the K. How would you do that? In the sense that if you said, particularly in, say, for our Indigenous or so, there are limited businesses operating. How would you make something that you can measure and that will actually give you something meaningful? Certainly, most businesses do have policies and etc. on how they run their business, and also that which because of the social impact, etc., is part of all most advanced sort of businesses these days. So I think those things are important. I just without fully understanding what a target looks like as an arbitrary number, rather than a lens for which we actually work towards it so that they do get their weightings, etc. So we are considering it without necessarily putting ourselves in a corner with a number that we may not be able to achieve, and therefore fail something that we cannot influence. So, and unless I got something clear that we can say, here's something that we can check, and here's something we can measure and work with, then setting ourselves up for artificially trying to control something that it may not be within our ability to do so. And I just want to see, well, if there's going to be something, where do you get that information from? How can we assess this as something that is doable and something that will still achieve the outcomes you're looking for, and still be reasonably equitable? Because again, all sorts of businesses have all sorts of issues, and this COVID is certainly one that has delivered many. What does that look like too? Because there are other issues that we would also need to consider. Thank you.
Thank you, Franz. Members? If not, I'll just make some quick remarks and perhaps a couple of questions. I think what, oh no, I see Sandy's hand up. I'll go to you first, Sandy.
Thanks, Chair. I've just look at it's really just understanding that, you know, policy is to enable good outcomes, and I'm sure the policy will come back to us. This, you know, it is a workshop, so, and I'm just very mindful that the case studies are based on sort of the positive experience that we've already had when somebody's been mindful that we need more than one outcome from our procurement. It is the best leverage we've got. What did you say? It was 190 million or something in procurement, as you know. So we've got great leverage, and we should be able to use it better. And so this is just sort of looking at some of the lenses through which we can actually use our leverage better. And I'm not sure what the targets would look like. I'm just really trying to get good policy that actually gives very clear ability for us to deliver better outcomes through our procurement.
Thank you, Sandy. So I'll just say, and picking up on that sentiment from the Lord Mayor and also from Councillor Knoll, I actually think the targets are a little bit muddle-headed, because you want to set a target, but you also want to answer all these questions. You can't do both. If you've got a target, it's going to be encouraging you to skew it in a particular way, and I just don't think that's the aim. I don't think that's what you're trying to achieve, and I just worry that if you've got a target, you're going to artificially skew towards a particular way. And the only other thing I'd say is that if you were going to go for a target, the target should be to spend less. And I don't think it's a bragging matter to come into here and say, oh, we spend $118 million a year. I think that figure needs to go down. And I just really hope that cost effectiveness, when it comes into your matrix, your decision-making matrix, is actually what reigns supreme. So I'll just leave you with those. And Councillor Donovan.
Thanks, Chair. And without entering into any debate, it would be useful if we could have from administration some case studies that highlight how successful targets are, and if there's any to the contrary, if there's evidence to the contrary, because I think it's easy to look at targets superficially and to consider that they may lead to artificial outcomes. But given my understanding of the research, which is in no way comprehensive, so I'd be really interested to get a better understanding either way. But my understanding of the research is that targets work, and they work because it does force, because of course what happens is there's market dominance with entrenched systemic inequality. So the very purpose of targets are to shift that entrenched systemic inequality, which we know exists. So I'd be really interested to see some research either way to either support that we should be looking at targets, or if there's anything that suggests that we shouldn't, then likewise to look at that.
Thank you. And Councillor Sims.
Sorry, Deputy Lord Mayor, it's okay. I just wanted to draw to your attention, I think there was a division happening. I could hear some bells ringing in the background, so I wasn't sure if you needed to go. So just wanted to let you know.
I'm not so important, but thank you, Robert.
Yes, Chair. Look, I have made my views known about this, but is there any way we can stop the ringing of the parliamentary bells? I just feel I need to go and vote whenever I hear them.
Your thoughts are noted, Councillor. Given there's no other questions, we'll close this item and then we'll go to 4.2, the Adelaide Aquatic Centre. And we do have with us Warren, who did the report for us, so he's available to answer your questions as well. But I'll pass over to Tom McCready.
Elected members, thank you very much for tonight. And to you, presiding member, if we could have the presentation up on the screen, that would be fantastic. Okay, members, I'll just touch on the workshop purpose, which is important, which is on the front sheet there. Naturally, we're responding to the works that was undertaken through Warren Green Consultancy and also under the direction of Council in regards to the needs analysis. So tonight, we're particularly seeking clarity from Council relating to its vision for the future provision of recreational health and wellbeing services to meet the needs of the community. So really tonight is your opportunity to guide us, to inform us, and to actually assist us in regards to what direction you wish us to go in. Even though we've got this rich data from the needs analysis, which we can use, we're really wanting to hear your insights tonight. We also want to provide you through Warren facility examples, and that examples are really based on the information that we've captured. So we're able to give examples of what scale looks like, what services look like, indicative high-end costs, and also what it would attract in regards to visitation to a precinct. Just noting we're not locked into anywhere within the city. And when we talk parklands, and that covers 763 hectares of parklands. When we talk city locations, you talk city locations. So we're open to all. And we want, as indicated, provide a high-level cost estimate, which will look at continued operations within the current facility, renewal of the existing facility option, and naturally a redevelopment of a new facility, either on the existing site, and we classify that as a brownfield development, either at a local comparable growth or optimal scale, and other alternative examples, and that includes a greenfield development, which is anywhere within the city of Adelaide. So if we can skip through the slides, just keep going, please. Keep going, keep going. Okay, so I think it's important now, sorry, previous slide. I think it's important to reflect on where we've been, and I think it's important to understand that Council's guiding principles were set to inform and also to guide a proponent through an unsolicited bid process. That unsolicited bid process is now closed. Those guiding principles were also a series of non-negotiables for the proponent, so it really directed the proponent in regards to a certain direction. Out of that became the participation framework, and then naturally what flowed on from that was the needs analysis. And then what has come up through, and you'll be reflected through Warren tonight, is facility development examples of redevelopment of the new facility. I think it is important to understand that Warren, through his consultancy, has responded to Council's brief. And that's naturally to look at the current participation rates and actually identify the social value of aquatic facilities to the local and the broader community. We've got 715,000 people that use the facility on an annual basis, but from the needs analysis data, it says that there's certainly an opportunity to attract more if council wishes. We want to ascertain the future demand for aquatics and recreational facilities within the City of Adelaide. It's really important because lifestyle, wellness, dare I say, recreation is actually changing within the city. You're seeing certainly more demand for well-being and allied services coming into recreational facilities above and beyond your traditional recreational requirements, being a pool, gym, so on and so forth. We've undertook an investigation of the current aquatic markets. We've looked at the trends. We're looking at broader industry trends, and naturally we've looked at what other competitors are doing and done some benchmarking. Best practice is really important too, is that best practice talks about what industry is actually doing out there within the recreational field, and how that actually responds in regards to the components, and that's the facility components and also the operation and management. Car parking is always important to look at, because naturally if you're expecting X amount of participation at the centre in regards to visitation, you need provisions either through parking or enhanced or improved public transport facilities that actually can bring people to this facility. We certainly want to look at the sustainable design and then naturally pass or similar projects. So what Warren has done is he's prepared a feasibility assessment of broader options, which he'll talk through, provide a high level analysis of likely investment required to address those needs. And then naturally what Warren's presented is rich data to help inform council's decision-making process and actually guide them through this. Next slide, please. So the important thing for us as we've moved through the unsolicited bid and through the guiding principles, really at the end of the day, that's parked, that's gone. What we really want to do now is to address what's council's strategic imperatives and aspirations in regards to looking at future recreational and aquatic facilities. You can see the current environment, and it's when we said post-COVID-19, that's not in regards to restrictions, it's actually in regards to what people are actually expecting out of leisure, now moving into that allied health services and moving into different sorts of recreational services provided coming out of COVID-19. We want to look at various other options which are listed there. I won't go through them all. But what that will lead to is an options review that we can actually inform and guide council through this. But ultimately what we're seeking is views from council relating to its vision, the future provision of aquatic facilities, recognizing the recreational health and well-being trends across our community. There's a series of challenges that are before you at the minute. Which are, parkland's location and its integration, but it's not limited to, as I highlighted at the start. Council's willingness to continue to provide services without external funding. We're just being a little bit preemptive there. The reality is, we will certainly be attempting to attract funding from the various government agencies, but we want to understand council's view in regards to the importance of these services and what commitment it wishes to put towards that. And then naturally council's view, noting the response to the needs analysis and the types of services. Next slide, please. What we've done, just this slide in particular, is we've done a reference point around North Adelaide and around the edges of the CBD. We actually just wanted to talk to you in regards to what's actually occurring in this space, in regards to what has occurred and what it will be occurring in regards to future demand. Reasons why, well, this is the possibility to attract more people. You will have more workforce in and around that particular area. You will have more hotels, you will have more hospitals. There will be probably a requirement for allied services. So I think it's important to actually highlight that the future Adelaide, or the future of that section of the city, actually looks quite promising in regards to growth, and also in regards to where the demand will come from above and beyond our normal 715,000 visitations to date. Just move to the next slide, please. So the needs analysis findings, as indicated, the existing facility was constructed. It was a 50-meter pool and a dive pool. It was approximately 50 years ago in December of last year, and it is certainly reaching the end of its asset life cycle and requires significant investment in the next 1 to 10 years. I would like to highlight, thank you very much for those elected members who could go today to have a look at the facility, and you can certainly see some of the challenges, also the opportunities we have within that centre. The demand for the future participation based on the site location is in excess of 1 million visits. It's currently 1.3 million, and that's visits by 2030. And we'll refer you to the document in regards to that. The consultant certainly highlighted there's very few locations in Australia where a new facility will have this level of demand. Hence, the location is unique. However, to say that again, we could look at other parts of the parklands and the CBD. Research indicates that a contemporary replacement facility will exceed the pre-existing facility visitation numbers by 40%. So the demand is clearly there if you were to look at that. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that you need to build a bigger facility. It just means that you need to get the right service provision to be able to cater for that demand. The current ACC or A-AAC building footprint is approximately 12,000 square meters, while an example facility with over 1 million visitations as listed there, you can see we're looking at 7,200 square meters. That could also come down as well, depending if you want to go to a second floor or mezzanine floor. So footprints can be actually managed through looking at a 2-level facility. Next slide, please. So the consultant findings, despite its age, which was very interesting, is highly valued, which we knew, but the facility numbers in regards to visitation is doing extremely well based on the age of the asset. Certainly delivers a wide range of services, and naturally for us, there's a great importance for the community in regards to physical and mental health for many people. So they actually, that this facility is near and dear to them. Amongst the community, it was identified that the most important services were naturally recreational swimming is important. We didn't go necessarily into scale, but there was people who indicated 50. There was people who indicated 25 meters. Lap swimming lessons is very important to us in regards to learn to swim, but it also financially is extremely valuable, and it's probably one of our main income generators. Cafe or affiliated services in regards to secondary spend, being able to cater to the demands of the people who actually come to the centre. A gym is probably our second biggest revenue generator in regards to the facility, and certainly brings clientele in who also use the other services and avail of the services such as spa, sauna, steam and aquatic facilities. Big user group for us, and was highlighted through the survey, is schools and sporting organisations. It is important that we service some 100 plus schools in and around the region, and they use that for their learn to swim and for aquatic services and whatever, and that also includes water polo. We've also got a range of various organisations, sporting organisations, who use the facility for various things. That includes water polo. Please noting that the sporting organisations, none of them are subsidised. So we receive no government funding for those elite sporting bodies or sporting organisations. That's provided to the state aquatic facility. There's certainly different, significant difference in expectations in regards to the community needs. That ranges from your casual recreational user right up to your sporting group. So it is a facility to all. The issue is that it doesn't necessarily align itself and cater to all in regards to services it provides. And given new developments near the city over the next 10 to 20 years, we're really seeking to see what council's views are on meeting their needs. Next slide, please. So what we've just done is a snapshot in regards to what the URSA website and the needs analysis came through. As you can clearly see that it's really 50-50 in regards to both male and female and how they use the facility. The age group demographic is quite strong in regards to that 25-year group and whatever. However, we've got a real myriad of users. Interestingly, a lot of our local residents and whatever and ratepayers, we've got certainly an aging group there who really value the benefits of the aquatic facility in regards to aquarobics and actually just water activities. You can see the top services as listed across there, the 5 top, and then you can see the mode of transport that actually how people actually come into it. But the important bit is coming back to the car park again. You can see at present, if there wasn't a change in regards to public transports in its location or proximity to the facility, most people, 73% of people actually come to the centre via their own personal vehicles or get dropped off. 13% are walking. We could probably increase certainly our cycling community, but public transport certainly is low. Next slide. So what we've done is what we took is some of the information in 2013 that was done through SGL, Simply Great Leisure. And they looked at a number of sites in regards to the city. Some of those sites naturally are no longer available because they've been occupied or developed upon. But they did certainly look at the current aquatic centre site, and that rated quite high in regards to because of its catchment. Again, that was based on people coming from the north and east. But again, you could actually say if it was located somewhere else, you get people from the east and the south or whatever. So the reality is you build up your usage pattern. But we get a lot of school groups coming from the north and east at this present stage. Park 24 is on the eastern side of the railway tracks opposite Etsa Park. Naturally, there's an opportunity there. And Park 26 includes the Adelaide Oval and the adjacent tennis and health clubs. That was really getting down, and also Park 4, getting down into that riverbank precinct and whatever, and starting to look at that. The Park 1, as say, which is additional site 4, that's where the golf club is, or the par 3, and linking that back into, we've got restaurant facilities down there at the minute. We've got a par 3 golf course, and we have got a car park that's actually there, and that would need to be looked at. The ones that were looked at through Simply Great Leisure, we just highlighted them. They're no longer available. But again, we're happy to progress with other sites and open to that for council if they wishes to direct and have a look at that. But just listed there. And you've got North Terrace as part of the leisure entertainment, North Terrace as part of the new Royal Adelaide Hospital, and then naturally North Terrace is part of the old Royal Adelaide. And I believe you had a presentation earlier talking about Lot 14. So it looks as if that site's pretty well prescribed in regards to outcomes. Next slide. So what I'm going to do is hand over to Warren, and Warren will go through the high-level strategic options in regards to the review, and then we'll come back towards the tail end and we'll have some questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Tom. And just Warren, before we unmute you, just want to reiterate that we have, many of us, been over a lot of this in great detail for a very, very long time now. And you've provided some excellent reports previously, as have our administration. So really just looking for the new information, the new analysis and the new insights. And you should be unmuted now. Thanks, Warren.
Thank you, and thanks for the opportunity of talking through the summary report, and thanks, Tom, for your introduction as well, which is always very comprehensive. If we just go to the first slide, and I'll take these as being read, but just a couple of points there, as Tom mentioned. This is an extension of the needs analysis, and it's really for information to provide some insights and some information about the potential options associated with redevelopment and or renewal or brownfields, greenfields development. So I'll talk through those different options. Just as the next slide. It's actually really interesting, the fact that this facility gets over 700,000 visitations per annum. It really does reinforce that there's exceptionally strong demand within the community to use this facility and the associated services. It does come at a cost to council, and the cost is estimated at about $2.5 million per annum. So that 2.5 consists of the deficit figure, plus also an apportioned value of about 1.8 million per annum in terms of major maintenance and renewal costs also. Tom highlighted that it is a really unique and quite exceptional site in terms of the demand, the proximity to the CBD, and the general opportunities that it avails as well. Just to the next slide. So that's the summary of the demand, and that was outlined in the needs analysis in a fair bit of detail as well, but it just confirms the demand potential for this facility as being about 1.3 million visitations, which is over 600,000, or give or take about 600,000 more than you're currently experiencing. Again, that's really significant. To put that into context, there's probably only 20 facilities in the country that do 1 million visitations plus per annum. So it is a really significant demand figure. Next slide. So I'll just talk through 4 examples. Firstly is the status quo, keeping the facility as it is. The second one's the redevelopment option. The example B is a local facility, which is a smaller facility that can be morphed then into a developed facility, which is option C, example C. So I'll just talk through each of those concepts and ideas. So the next slide. So the status quo is, as you're aware, and there's been a fair bit of detail over this. So it would really involve an ongoing deficit of about $2.5 million. That's a subsidy figure. Ongoing renewal works, and then because of the age of the asset, as Tom mentioned, the risks associated with failure and potentially intermittent closures. And it's important to identify that or highlight that each scenario that's on the table in this presentation would require some type of closure period to achieve the outcome. Next slide. So option A is the redevelopment option. And this is based on the work that was done back in 2013 by another consulting team, SGL. What it involves, the right-hand concept of demolishing the Western Grandstand, replacing the ground level of the Western Grandstand with changing rooms, putting a gymnasium space on top of that, which is the concept to the right, so that's the upper level, relocating the entry point so that the tentacles that exist at the moment to the north of the existing building footprint would be demolished, returning that space back to parkland. And consolidating the facility into that one pool hall. Repurposing the dive pool to become a learn to swim pool and a warm water pool, and expanding on the current leisure water space to make it more suitable or more dynamic, if you like, for families. This is quite a challenging redevelopment and renewal process. The unknowns really are the potential latent conditions. The functionality is a challenge because this is a very unique design in terms of a major facility around the country, given that it's one major pool hall. A more contemporary facility would actually isolate each of those water spaces into one particular zone for temperature control purposes, for ambience, for functionality, etc. It's still very much a challenge to do this with a redeveloped facility. So there's still a gap between this redevelopment process and a contemporary development. As an example of a major facility redevelopment, particularly an older facility, North Sydney Pools, currently in the stages of undergoing a redevelopment planning process. And that was costed initially at about $30 million. And I understand that it's now being costed at closer to $55 to $60 million. So when I've put a figure here, it's really a minimum figure, and it's put forward with many unknowns in terms of latent conditions, community expectations, etc., etc. Might move to example B. So example B is more of a local facility. It's to give you an example, it's probably a larger version of the Fluorio facility that was built, finished a couple of years ago. it's got far more capacity than that facility, and it's got some additional features. So this is an example of a more contemporary design in terms of the layout. So the entry point is to the west, more proximal to the car park, being more suitable for special needs groups, for older adults, for universal design purposes. If I talk you through an experience with this, you can understand the differences between the redeveloped facility versus a more contemporary facility. So in this instance, let's think of a customer that wants to come in and relax in the warm water pool, use the sauna, spa, steam. They would enter the reception point and then go to the right-hand side of that corridor, basically move directly to the warm water pool and potentially use one of those cubicle changing rooms. So their experience would be quite relaxing, quite controlled, if you like. It certainly wouldn't involve any crossover amongst active learn to swim participants and young children, and a more dynamic part of the facility, which would happen on the other side of the changing rooms. So the user experience is significantly better. The footprint obviously relatively is far more efficient. The environmental factors in terms of ESD, temperature control, energy consumption are far more effective as well. And this particular option would also allow for a potential future development, which then moves to example C. So we'll just go to that next slide. So example C, you can see, is example B plus an outdoor area, so an outdoor 50-metre pool plus also an outdoor leisure water space. And also on the bottom end of the concept, there's an expansion of the gym and an additional program room that's been included as well. So this sort of facility is got the potential of accommodating in excess of 1 million visitations per annum. The same principles apply from an operational perspective as in example B, that is that different user groups can have their own unique experience. So there's potential, for example, to have an entry point to a dedicated entry point to the outdoor 50-metre pool for a carnival, for example, where spectators basically can come in and access that point without affecting someone who wants to come in and use the warm water pool. And conversely, if a young family that wants to come in and use the leisure water, or a person who wants to use the gym. So it's been designed with the user experience in mind, with zones in mind, with capacity considerations, but also with the opportunities associated with integrating with the parkland by having a softer outdoor area that can be a softer transition from a building bulk to an outside area. As Tom mentioned also, this building footprint, as with example B, could also be further reduced if the programming area, the gymnasium and the other spaces were actually put on level 1. So there's actually an opportunity there to reduce the building footprint, but the trade-off there is slightly higher building height. My understanding is the existing building height is about 17 to 20 metres at its apex, which is obviously exceptionally high. This option as a ground floor option would probably be between, or maybe 5 to 6 metres in height by comparison. So it's significantly lower in scale the way it sits in the park. That's just an estimate, obviously, the 6 metres in height. Just moving to the next slide. So obviously just some images. The top left one talks about the importance of universal design accessibility. The second slide is about dedicated user spaces, family spaces. The bottom slides are about the importance of a diverse range of changing room spaces to accommodate a diverse range of needs. What I tend to find when I'm involved in facility redevelopments is one of the highest priorities identified by existing facility users is enhancements to change room spaces. And most facilities now have 4, if not 5 different change room options for group change, for family change, male-female change, dry spaces, etc., etc. So they become fairly important in terms of accommodating the different needs. Next slide. Again, just for more images about the dry spaces, enhancing social spaces, passive spaces for social interaction. Tom makes a very good point and a very important point about the changing needs of recreation and the importance for these facilities now to provide a medium for social interaction, for a relaxing experience, and not just the traditional Australian approach of high intensity activity and competition and sport. The bottom images there are, the one on the left-hand side is Prince Alfred Park Pool, which is in Sydney. That was actually a precinct development of the parkland, generally speaking, and the pool was a component of that. That's been a really successful facility. And the one to the right-hand side at the bottom there is Flurio, which is a low-level facility that's in a parkland as well. Tom mentioned that's sort of fairly much close to practical capacity now in terms of its utilisation. So that's been a very successful facility for the community too. Next slide. This gives you an indication about the sort of overall assessments of those different options. If we look at the status quo, the capital cost over the next 10 years will be $16 to $20 million. So that's that renewal cost that we've identified together working with the asset officers. The redevelopment option as a minimum is $36 million, and I gave you this North Sydney example. The local facility we have more certainty on in terms of cost of being circa 30 to 35, and the regional facility done as one facility, not as done as a redevelopment, is up to $55 million. Examples B and C exclude the demolition cost of the existing facility, which is identified at about $6 million. Probably go to the building footprints, and you can see, particularly if we use example C, how substantially less the building footprint is compared to the status quo or the redevelopment option. So there's quite a significant difference there in the building footprint requirements and the site area requirements because of the more contemporary nature of the facilities. Visitation numbers, example C, is as a minimum 1 million, and I would expect it to be more than that. Net performances, you can see the quite significant variation in net performance right from the current situation of 700 deficit for the status quo facility, on top of the capital works, right through to $1 million surplus in example C. And we, as part of the needs analysis, consulted with a number of managers of major facilities around the country, and they're actually achieving those figures, plus incorporating major maintenance work, which is a fairly significant change from the current financial performance and position. As I mentioned, all the options would require a closure period. The relationships with the parks vary. Obviously, the current status quo situation has a relatively poor relationship with the park. The risk factors I've certainly touched on, the risks associated with doing any major work with the current asset or basically leaving it as is. The designs I've spoken about and also the type as we've gone through the different options. Just going to the summary, which is on the next slide, doing an analysis against the active city strategy.
I'm sorry to interrupt, Mr. Green, and sorry, members, I've just stepped into the chair because Councillor Hyde is having some difficulties with his computer. I'm just conscious there's quite a few members that have got their hands raised to speak. So I'm just wondering if maybe we could move to the closing of the presentation, bearing in mind that we've had this sent to us prior to the meeting. And then I might hand over to Tom to make a few comments, and then we'll move into an open discussion. Does that sound okay? Sorry to cut you off.
No, that's fine. That's fine. So I think this visually indicates the strength of, example C in terms of alignment back with the principles, whilst also indicating the challenges of the current situation of the Adelaide Aquatic Centre as a consequence of its original design options. So I think that's sort of the overall summary, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Thanks,
Rob. Sorry.
Oh, you're back.
Yeah.
Oh, I thought those bells might have called for you, Alex.
No. It's our perhaps the procurement of our laptops needs a bit of a looking into.
It's the NBN. That's the problem.
You summed up my word exactly. I was thinking the same things. So, Tom, over to you if there's anything you wish to add, but very conscious we do have other workshops on, and everyone's positions on this has been well thought out over a number of months, if not years almost. You need to be unmuted, Tom. Let me find you. There we go.
Thank you, Presiding Member, and thank you, Warren, for your presentation and the amount of effort you've went into the needs analysis. Can I go to the next slide? It's very simple. There's 2 slides left. So this is the opportunity for Council to ask questions. Also, really interested in Council's vision and views. And naturally, a majority of Council members had the opportunity to go through the Aquatic Centre. And you've probably had various debates and conversations with members of the community. So I'm really seeking your views in regards to your future vision. As indicated by Warren, demand is there. It's well loved, but the demand is up to 1.3 million. It comes with a price tag. So really, I'm over in your hands, Council, in regards to what questions. Both Warren, I, and Sean are available to answer your questions tonight.
Okay, and thank you, Tom. We'll go to the Lord Mayor first.
Thank you, Chair. I have a couple of questions. Tom, when we were at the pool today, Sean said that for more than 90% of the time, only the 25-metre pool was used, and that as a 50-metre pool, the boom, of course, used to sit in the middle, so that we had 2 25-metre pools. I'm just keen to understand the 50-metre pool, like who is it generally used by or for what? So I've got several questions, but if you can just answer that one.
I'll address that one first, and Sean's beside me and he can add to it if he needs to. So the 50 traditionally is used by elite sporting bodies in regards to carnivals or swims, or even in the early mornings should it be adjusted for our lap swimmers. But traditionally the 25 configuration is actually put there so we can actually provide lap swimming and recreational swimming to the masses. As you probably are aware, Lord Mayor, lap swimmers only like 1 person per lane, and that's not possible in the 50 metres. So we need to actually put the boom in the middle so we can actually accommodate everyone. So Sean indicated 90, it's probably slightly less than that, but the reality is it is there to accommodate carnivals, elite sporting groups, and those swimmers and whatever, where we open it up in the mornings. The masters in particular, we get a lot of masters users of that facility, and they love a 50-metre swim.
Okay, thank you. The second one is that there's a lot of discussion around demand and the research that looks at the demand. So when we're talking about demand of 1.3 million, is that from the City of Adelaide or the surrounding councils, given that at the moment most of the demand comes from our surrounding councils? Do we have any information on that?
I'll answer it, and if Warren wants to come in, that's by all means. But effectively, that is the ratepayers and residents of the City of Adelaide and the surrounding suburbs and also the regions. We actually believe there is a serious demand of 1.3. But Warren, would you like to just add to that?
No, I think it's a really, really good question, and it's actually a really unique facility from that perspective, where there's a council facility that is, of its total visitation numbers, is only experiencing about 10% from its local community. So it is exceptional from that perspective. We didn't break down that 1.3 million into local government areas, but based on the benchmarking, I would suggest it would be reasonably comparable to the current circumstances.
And the other one is just a suggestion that I'd like to talk to members about, and it's something that Mark and I were talking about on the way back from the pool today. And obviously, you know, people want us not to close the asset, and if we did, then it's, you know, a 2 to 3 year horizon. What if we actually built a pool from scratch in a different location? And the location that is one that I would like to have a think about is on the corner of Barton Terrace West and Prospect Road, which is opposite the New Caledonian, which is, so therefore you could do the build while still operating the facility, then you would close the facility and reopen the new facility. In that way, we could continue to deliver a facility and then build from scratch. Obviously, we still have the demolition, but then that would be returned to parklands at the end of it. The other reason that I was thinking of that is because the mode of transport reflects the catchment area and also reflects the public transport that's available to and from. Obviously, if it was at the end of O'Connell, it's really going to tap into the flow that actually comes down O'Connell and from Prospect Road and is on a bus route. So I don't really need to say anything more. I'd just be really keen to hear elected members' views on that. And also noting that another aquatic facility is not in the state sports infrastructure plan. If we can get to some sort of landing sooner rather than later, then I do think that we can still actually have those conversations around funding both with state, federal, and with the surrounding councils. Thank you.
Thanks, Lord Mayor. Councillor Kira.
Thanks, Chair. Just to the administration, we'll be getting more information. We'll be getting further updates and further fleshing out of our options. Can we please get a fleshed out appraisal of the option of closing or keeping the centre closed for a period of 2 years, 24 months, so that we can properly appraise the entire situation with demand, with the economy, and with potentially a future private sector capital injection?
Through you, presiding member, we can certainly look at that as part of the analysis, and that would look at the potential savings to council. Naturally, we're very mindful of our staff associated costs, so we would look at that as well. So yep, certainly we can do that.
Thank you. Please do that. I'd be most grateful for that. In terms of the vision that I may have for the centre, I think at this juncture, the best vision I could offer is that we remain absolutely realistic about the situation with respect to the economy. We do not know how things are about to unfold. We particularly do not know what the ensuing wave of economic contraction may well be, given there's going to be a very large very large level of defaults out in the economy. Once all of the deferred bank payments come due, there'll be a large lump sum cascading wall of bank payments that will be due in a few months. We have only just entered the economic picture that is ensuing from the COVID crisis. We are by no means anywhere near the end of that crisis. My vision is that we, at this point, take stock. We have just had an expression of interest from the private sector that was arguably cruel by some quite grotesque politicisation. I think we need to hold back, take stock, and not rush into planning and designing a facility without some serious time to consider our options, particularly given how decrepit the facility is and how it quite plainly needs to be rebuilt from scratch in a purpose-built manner.
Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Kira. Councillor Sims.
Thank you, Chair. I think the Lord Mayor's suggestion is a very good one. I like the idea of being able to begin construction on a new centre whilst having the existing facility available for community access. So I think that sounds like a good idea. In terms of how we get there, obviously it would be great if we got federal or state government funding. Failing that, I'd be open to us borrowing money to fund a project such as this, because I think it's a really important investment in community infrastructure. It's a community asset. And I think it is the kind of thing that we could borrow to fund if need be, recognising, of course, that it would also be a local job creator too. And I think that's, would provide a bit of a local stimulus to the economy as well. I guess in terms of the broader vision question, it's great that we've done this needs analysis work. My view would be that we need to come up with a clear framework for engaging the community around some of the options. And whether that take the form of some sort of people's panel or some sort of structure where we can engage with users, residents, local businesses, and try to build some level of community consensus around how we deal with this. My strong view is we definitely need to replace the centre and get something up and running that is of really high quality, that's going to bring the council into the next phase. But we need to work with the community and all stakeholders in doing that. And so I think there's an opportunity for us to learn from the lessons of the past, the recent past, and develop a really good framework around community engagement. But I think what the Lord Mayor has suggested in terms of one concept is a very good one. I think that makes sense.
Thank you, Rob. Councillor Martin.
Thank you, Chair. Look, a question for Mr. Green, if I may. There is much conversation about the Adelaide Aquatic Centre having usage levels by local ratepayers of around 10%. Is this the only city where that occurs? I'm thinking about the Melbourne Sports and Aquatic Centre in Albert Park. Does that have just exclusive use by the locals, or say the Doon Kennedy Aquatic Centre in Hobart? Is that the same thing? It's just all locals, or is it a mix of attendances from different locations because they are capital city centres?
Correct, yes. MSAC, as you say, is a capital centre, capital city facility, and it was actually predominantly funded by the state government. It was opened in 1997 at a cost of $65 million. And that was fully funded by the Community Support Fund, which was a state government, predominantly funded by the Community Support Fund. In terms of the usage breakdown, I would suggest that the local residents, it sits in the city of Port Phillip, just outside of the city of Melbourne, would be less than 20% of the total users. But as I say, the strategic positioning of that facility is as a state government facility. And as you're probably aware, it was used as a Commonwealth Games venue as well. So it takes on quite a substantial significance as a state asset. And I suppose that's fundamental. The lesson there is that it's fundamental in terms of the decision making associated with the strategic positioning of any future facility that sits in the city of Adelaide is who is the target market and what services are going to be provided as well.
And when we talk about, I'm conscious that people are worried about the pandemic and the wash up of all of that and so on, but to get an idea of the period for this vision, how long do we expect this facility to last if it were, say, the one that seems to be favoured by some of my colleagues, that expanded new option?
So, a contemporary facility, Core Melbourne Sports and Aquatic Centre, built in 1997, so it's moving towards 25 years. That's certainly got a minimum of 15 years plus left in the asset. I would think it's got probably 30 years left in the asset. So even up to 50 years plus potentially.
Okay, so we're talking about the second half of the 21st century as an end date. Yep. And one for Tom, if I may. There was a map that was shown locating planned or likely approved developments in North Adelaide. And just so I can understand, 18 and 19 referred to the Old Adelaide Inn and the Regal Park. Are there development proposals for that? And if there are they for larger accommodation facilities or something else?
If we could go back to that slide, Jenny, that would be great. So, Councillor, anywhere in particular you wish to talk to? Because I've got people here from our planning team.
Yeah, sure. 18 and 19, which are closest to the aquatic centre. One is the Old Adelaide Inn, and the other is Regal Park. These are accommodation expansions, or is it some other use?
Yeah. Look, it's actually, what it states is it's approved for redevelopment. I can't clarify tonight if that's accommodation and whatever, but certainly approved for redevelopment in regards to that site. And we've just tried to capture the larger scale redevelopments within that precinct. But we can certainly come back to you, Councillor, in regards to what that looks like and what is being proposed.
Yeah, look, it would be valuable in the context of understanding what growth will be. Thank you. Look, I just wanted to endorse much of what's been said. I think we are talking about a regional centre, just as Melbourne has a sports and aquatic centre, and it would be wonderful if the state government funded this entirely. That's not likely, but a very substantial contribution would be useful. And similarly, there's the Doon Kennedy Aquatic Centre in Hobart, which is again a regional centre. And the significant thing about all of these places is that they drive visitation. Not only, as is explained here with that regional centre model, is there the expectation of a $1 million surplus over 50 years. That is the construction costs returned. But in addition, it drives visitation to the city, because you end up with events like the Australian Swimming Championships, World Swimming Cups, Pan-Pacific Games, and I'm aware too of other events like National Diving Championships. And if we can accommodate it, water polo and underwater hockey championships, these all bring visitations. And something just, to calculate the impact, something that would be generating, and let's be optimistic, say 1.5 million visitations a year, would be just like filling Adelaide Town Hall 4 times a day, every day of the year. That's how many people we're talking about bringing into the city. That is a very large impact on the local economy that's possible. And additionally, it would complement the attractions that we have, from Rundle Mall to Central Markets and on to Adelaide Oval. The example C is, in my view, the only option. I would say, though, it must have, if it's to ensure that all stakeholders, all current stakeholders, have a continuing facility. It must have a dive pool or water polo or water hockey or whatever facility, along with all of the others. And additionally, as I said, it does need to be funded by government in some measure. And my view is, if the federal government can find $20 million for one sporting club, for one code of football among dozens of sports, to put an administrative headquarters on the parklands, then it can find more than that for a regional swim centre. It is not a big thing to be asking for in that context. Insofar as the location is concerned, the construction would require, according to the paperwork, up to 2 years. If the venue is to be in the same location, and that would mean we would close it for 2 years, and that would not be acceptable, I think, to the users of the facility. It would not be a good outcome for people who rely on that, including our ratepayers, but including groups such as disabled groups, which use the current facility, and Staff Force, which uses the current facility for training purposes. Now, my view is that we need a parallel service operating as we construct. That necessarily means a new location. I like the idea of the Lord Mayor that we could locate it somewhere else on Park 2. And there is also Park 3, which is adjacent, which has no use whatever. It is largely overgrown. It has a cricket pitch on it. I'm not aware of any leases attached to it. And it is a very large, by comparison to the footprint of the current swim centre, it's a very large site. And it provides good access too, by the way, as the current facility does, from Robe Terrace and from O'Connell Street. And it also would have access along the back of Lefevre Terrace, although I'm not sure how successful that would be. There are a few better sites than Park 2 or Park 3. And in the interim, I ask that we keep the current centre operating. Clearly, there is not much point in spending more than is necessary than to just keep it functioning while a new centre is underway. But we cannot afford to delay making a decision, because whatever decision we make will not be delivered in this term of council. It will be in a new term of council. And if we don't make that decision, it'll be left to another term of council and possibly another term after that before it's completed. You know, time is now to bite the bullet, in my view.
Thanks, Councillor. And I just saw the Lord Mayor wave her hand. I might just go back to you, Sandy, just quickly. Yep.
Thank you. Look, I was just going to, just from what Councillor Martin was saying, I know that those of you might remember we had some conversations around the Commonwealth Games and use of various facilities. And in speaking with some of the members who were involved in that pitch, not us, but external, I know that Marion wasn't supported for the Com Games because the seating capacity was only 3,500 and they needed 10,000. So for us to be looking at things like the Pan Pacific Games or things, we wouldn't be able to accommodate with a regional centre, because otherwise it's actually the spectator capacity that you have to build for to be able to do that. And I think we need to be very clear in part of our decision making that we're looking for a regional facility that is looking after community needs and swim schools and schools, as opposed to the elite facility, which is where which is what Marion is. So I just would make, I think we probably need some clarity around that as well in our decision making, because it's a very different facility we'd have to do if we're going to go for the elite sports. That's all, just in response to Councillor Martin.
Okay, thank you, Lord Mayor. Oh, Philip, I see you gesticulating. Did you?
Yes, I was gesticulating, as you put it. Look, I accept that. And look, I was part of a couple of meetings between the former Lord Mayor and Commonwealth Games officials. And what we're talking about is not an elite facility. What they wanted and why Marion was not acceptable as a venue was because it didn't have the seating, but more particularly, it didn't have the capacity for temporary seating. And I thank the Lord Mayor for raising this, because in any design, what I'd be advocating is that there is the capacity within the facility to accommodate temporary seating. That's a really important point, because if you've got that ability, that is the space to expand it temporarily to accommodate a crowd, then you can host all of those things and it can drive those extra tourism dollars. That's what the Commonwealth Games people wanted from Marion. That's what they couldn't get. And we can deliver that with this facility.
Okay, thank you, Phil. Councillor Kouros.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. I'd like to thank administration for all the work they have done so far. It has been so detailed and it has been so long overdue. And I'm so grateful that we're getting to have these conversations in detail. And in response to what you're looking for tonight, I believe that the proposal that the Lord Mayor is saying would work. Building it opposite where the Caledonian is, or even on Part 3 for that matter, and building a centre to the example number 3, which is what we're probably all looking at. We want to keep the facilities that it has at the moment, is a great idea in the sense that you have got public transport that can easily access to that side of North Adelaide. We're also in a master planning stage for O'Connell Street, and we can talk about separated bikeways and allowing people to bike there more easily. So we can plan for all of that as the centre is being built, saying that it will take 2 years. So we can facilitate more of the other modes of transport that you're saying that is lacking in the centre, because it is positioned on the other side, and it does make that it's very difficult for buses to get there, and also allowing for car parking to be built on that space. So you're getting the balance of all modes of transport to be able to come to the centre to be used to reach the target that we're looking for, that for it to be feasible. Also, in saying that, I believe in positioning it there closer to O'Connell Street, you're also getting the added benefit for the businesses to have the capacity to thrive on it from being there. So all of that seems to add up for me, and also the fact that we can still have that centre operating while we're building the new centre. It just all makes sense. Coming down to money. We all know that that's the complicated issue here. We all want, and the public wants it as well. So it'd be great if the federal government or state government comes on board and supports us, because it's not something that is just not used by the ratepayers. It's used by the whole of the community, other council areas. You also asked, Tom, from us, you want to know what we want the centre to look like. What do we want it to offer in facilities besides, obviously the example C. I would like it to be obviously to adapt as a regional centre, and also to facilitate what Councillor Martin says, great. But I think health and wellbeing is a real big focus now. Mental health is, we're saying that it does support people to exercise, and also, we're looking at to have facilities like yoga and good gym facilities, hydrotherapy. We need to blend it more of that for the community to have that access. We don't have anything really like that unless you pay a premium at a very fancy gym, or you happen to live in an apartment that has a pool, or you happen to be close to some of the central pools in the city. But to have a centre that you can go to create that sort of environment, I think is really important for our community. I think we're on the right track. We're all saying the same things, and we're all on the same page. And, I hope that we do see something unfold this term of council.
Thank you, Councillor Kouros. And we definitely are all saying the same thing. So in the interest of time, I'd encourage councillors to add new things, but I just wanted to pass to Tom. Did you have something to clarify there?
Look, it was a very good question by the Lord Mayor and Councillor Martin in regards to looking at seating. Could we just go to option C? And I think hopefully Warren will support me in my commentary here as well. So if you look at option C, what Warren is really looking at there is that the facility is well serviced directly from the car park, and you've got an outdoor facility. Now, Warren certainly, and he referenced the Melbourne Sports and Aquatic Centre, because he was inherently responsible for that, and also the Commonwealth Games. But the way it's been designed, that outdoor space can operate outside of the normal remit of a normal centre. What you find in Commonwealth Games, unless it's a purpose-built pool, which is internalised, you require a lot of seating. Remember, you get around about 11,000 people wanting to watch the Commonwealth swimming, because Australia is, its #1 sport in regards to that. What they normally do is overlays around the 50-metre pool. And when we were working on the Commonwealth Games for South Australia, we were looking at pools specifically where we could put an overlay around the pool. They'd done that in Perth, where they had an outdoor pool and they put an overlay right round to actually effectively get that seating. So for all intents and purposes, it looked like a very grand swimming complex, but what it was an outdoor pool with scaffolding and seating and whatever. So look, the idea of that outdoor area, it does allow or does assist in regards to that commentary around Masters Games or any sort of bigger sort of exercises or events that happen within the CBD.
Thanks, Tom. Councillor Noel.
Okay, I'm with it. Yeah, I mean, my thoughts are a little bit different, not only because just to expand how we think about it rather than necessarily just look at what we see in front of us, and that guides us a bit more. That one, I suppose, if we're going to be just as something that's completely different to what everyone else is saying, that it is that if I start, is there a deep water component in this regional pool design? That's just a question. And if that being the case, because then I look at this and say, well, as we went through the pool today, we talked about each of the areas and the popularity of the swim school, and the various other aspects and the gyms, etc. So my question to that is, in an expanded pool, okay, how do each of them operate? What is it when you look at it that you envisage that an increased number of people using an enhanced service or enhanced pool would be using, and so that you can better determine where do you put your emphasis and where you don't. It's only because we talked about the 50-metre pool versus the 25. So, if the 25 and it gets you, obviously the most of the time you use that and on the occasion the other, is it worth that? I mean, obviously if you've got an indoor and outdoor option, well and good. But if not, well, obviously the 25-metre pool will give you the most of the things that you're interested in. And then whether we look at the positioning, etc. I mean, if we is this pool, because we talked about the warm areas, is that a different client? So when we're looking at the pool overall and all the facilities, do these facilities actually have to be all together because that's what you do, or are these facilities, can they be? Is there something that can be delivered in a split way simply because the people that use the various areas, they're not. There isn't a requirement for the entire facility to be one. In other words, so if you're doing lap pool swimming, is that a different demographic, and does it have to be with the leisure pool and the swimming school? Because that means that you have other options if you're trying to think of something a bit different. Same as the warm areas, the spas, and all that. Is that a different group of people? But it also informs a little bit. Can I build up a little bit higher? That just allows more options and possibly in other spaces that could be available that you could monetize with again selling air rights or whatever. It's just saying, okay, in this mix, this is how we could deliver something that's a bit different, and if that allows you more options for the city, then I think that would be really groovy. Just to see if that something that could work rather than necessarily the edge. Because I mean, again, being on the edge, you are being more one side of the city than the other. Obviously, you don't get the visitations from the people on the other side of the city. So, is there a space that, because you've been able to accommodate it in a different ways, that you're enabling more people to be able to access it just because your positioning, has been better. So look at that, and and also we look at the indoor-outdoor. Okay, obviously in summertime you can use outdoors. That's okay. So what is the variation of usage between a winter time and a summertime? Because that also then informs you, like for for your continuous sustainability of the facility and the usage, that we are building something that will get the maximum usage throughout the year, and that you can say, okay, we're doing this, then there can be then an idea towards saying, okay, this is what an outdoor facility is, this is the usage for this, and this is the situation in which we can do that. So I'm just coming more from an angle of, okay, everybody's talking about the north of Adelaide, that's nice. It hasn't encouraged more of our residents to use it, and okay, that'd be that. But if we're able to do something a little bit different and give ourselves more options, will we get more people from a greater access from around the city with the better public transport to get there? Will those sorts of things then give you a facility that you can obviously attract more people, be more convenient to the actual city, encourage more of our residents to use it, simply because we've been able to construct a facility, whether you build up a couple of stories and around the warm areas and whatever else, that you're building up rather than broad, and that obviously is an expense. And I mean, that's a conversation for that as an option, but it also enables you to be more flexible with where you wish to put it, and then enable you to have a few more ideas on, will this deliver more benefit to the city, whereas a facility still on the edge will still probably only give you the same outcomes as you're getting now, and with the people, because they're still coming there, possibly with the bus, but they're still going back by bus. So there isn't, and that's I suppose another question, having pools in another position, what is the evidence from other cities, how that interaction works within the city? Because then you can say, well, this is a pool, this is how people got here, this is what they did coming to the pool, but these are the other areas at which these people interacted with, and what benefit they gave to the greater city as well. Because it is then you're able to start to leverage a few more ways of looking at what the benefit is and how it can assist Adelaide as a city to get the maximum out of the facility as an attractor, but also as a centre of activity. And then certainly considering all the parking and everything that you need. Anyway, something a bit different. Thank you.
Right on time, Franz. Thank you for that. Councillor Mackie.
Thank you, Chair. I think I might be saying something similar to Councillor Knoll. The old Franklin Street bus depot site, a new swim facility as part of an integrated development on that site, centrally located, equidistant to north and south, all public transport modes, including tram, which will eventually go to North Adelaide. I think it would be an interesting option to explore, because we could exploit the airspace above the centre without the contestation of developing parkland's footprint, and absolutely acknowledging, of course, that the Lord Mayor's suggestion, which I think is also fine and very fine and worth exploring, would see a reduction in footprint. We have existing off-street parking amenity and facility in quite good abundance in the heart of the city, and of course at weekends and other times less competition for the utilisation of that existing infrastructure, which is of course a combination of council and private sector owned. Who's to say there wouldn't be the potential for exploring a PPP model on something that is in the heart of the city? So yeah, I would be really pleased to see at least that option considered in the menu that would come back to us for further consideration.
Thank you, Greg. There are no other hands. I might just make a couple of remarks before we go back to Tom, just to cover off on what the next steps are. Fully agree with Franz and Greg. And in fact, when that report came to us at the last council meeting and I asked for an undertaking that we consider alternative sites, I was actually specifically, I know I didn't specify, I was specifically seeking sites within the CBD and not within the parklands. not looking at greenfield sites within the parklands. They were sites within the city, based on the commentary that Franz made. So I do think we need to look at that a bit more thoroughly. We are a significant landholder within the city, and if by using appropriately zoned land, it is far easier for us to engage in a PPP, then we should absolutely be thinking about that. What I would say though is that we don't have enough money to go for the option that everyone wants. Now, I absolutely want the growth option. The growth option is the one we should be going for. It is the option that makes the most sense. But we don't have a lazy $60 million lying around. Neither do our ratepayers, which is actually where we get our money from. But at the same time, so we're at real risk without co-contribution from another level of government of only being able to deliver a smaller facility, which I think the community at large wouldn't accept. I don't think they'd accept that at all, such a broad brush reduction in services. That notwithstanding that it's not the City of Adelaide community, nevertheless, it is our aquatic centre, and we need to make the argument for it. I think it's about time that we remind ourselves of the fundamentals of why we're here, and that is to represent our community. And we just need to remind ourselves of what it is we do in politics. So if I'm going to go back to basics, if power is in many ways described as making someone do something you don't want them to do, we have the power to make people pay rates. What we don't have the power to do by ourselves is make the state government give us money for a new aquatic centre, or the federal government for that matter. In a democracy, though, the power lies with the people. And because of the unfortunate way that we treat the aquatic centre, which is a commercial asset, which is constantly in confidence, the people did not know that their aquatic centre has been in dire straits for many years now. And so they're only, and by virtue of the AFC bid, coming to terms as we speak with how decrepit the entire facility is. And we need to make the point to them and to other levels of government that if we don't get support for our aquatic centre, we are at serious risk of only being able to deliver reduced services to the community. That's what we need to be saying. We need to be telling the public that. And we need to be doing more advocacy, and we need to be telling everyone that uses the centre and the communities around, and working with the councils that are adjacent to us. And we need to go to the state government and say, if you don't fund this centre, it will end up in a reduced capacity. If you don't fund the centre, we will not be able to deliver services to the community. That's what needs to happen first and foremost. Then once the funding is on the table, we can talk about exactly how we're going to spend it. And I think most people want the large option. That's the growth option. That's the option that makes sense from a planning perspective, accommodating growth and population growth, from a well-being perspective, accommodating more visitations, from a visitations perspective, it just makes the most sense, but we can't deliver it alone. So it's time that this council buckled up, girded its loins, and went to the state government and said, we need this to be funded. If you do not fund it, the community will end up brushed over in this whole thing. And there has been a reluctance to accept. Those are my views. I think it's time for us to make clear the importance of this, alongside other councils, to our community. And I see Councillor Martin wishes to speak.
Concrete cancer written in places, unpleasant location it is to be. We actually talk it down, and when we don't need further debt coming out of that place. So I hear what you're saying. I just think we need to be moderating exactly what it is that we are saying about the centre.
Thank you, Councillor Martin, and appreciate your perspective. I would suggest that if you were to appropriately advocate, though, you need to go in firm and say what it were. There was another hand up. Robert, did you wish to? Were you going to speak? Or? No, you're happy. All right, understood. Tom, next steps, please.
Yeah, thank you, Presiding Member, and thank you, elected members, for your response to tonight. And again, thanks to Warren. So next steps is a follow-up meeting with council members. We wish to engage with you individually. We've done it with major projects before. We need to understand, so if there's any questions or any comments you wish to make, we will be setting up some time over the next week or so just to understand those questions and those thoughts. We want to do follow-up workshops, and I think that was highlighted through Councillor Kira in regards to really getting a real understanding moving forward to finalise the vision and the strategic imperatives. Naturally, I've heard it a lot tonight. We want to continue to advocate for third-party funding, so to work with the different levels of government to work that through. Again, consider alternative sites, and be that adjacent on Park 2 or alternative sites within the parklands or the CBD. And that will talk to the relevant size, services and access, etc. We will then want to come back with a detailed feasibility and further design after various workshops, and then naturally present a report for consideration for council. That consideration would also pay reference to council's long-term financial plan. It would also pay reference to what funding is available, and it will indicate indicative costs based on that feasibility, so council are fully aware if they were to make a decision. And we will look at all options as discussed tonight. Thank you, Council.
Fantastic. Thank you, Tom, and thank you, Warren, for appearing remotely. That brings us now, members, to 5.1, which is exclusion for of the public to consider in confidence a couple of items, and I'll seek a mover and a seconder for 6.1 that we move into confidence. If we can, yep, thank you, Councillor Noel, seconded Councillor Ibrahimzadeh. Members, did you wish to speak on this? Councillor Martin, was that a yes? Was that a no? Oh, you were going to move it. Oh, all right, okay. A leopard can change their spots after all. Back to Councillor Noel to sum up. Thank you, summed up. Put that to the vote. Those in favour? Those against? That is carried. 6.2, seek a mover and a seconder. Moved by Councillor Noel, seconded by Councillor Ibrahimzadeh. Councillor Noel, did you wish to speak? Councillor Ibrahimzadeh? No. Sorry, Councillor Martin, I didn't lower your hand from before. Did you wish to speak on this one? No, okay. No hands up. Back to Councillor Noel to sum up. Summed up, put that to the vote. Those in favour? Those against? That is carried. Any participants not associated with items 6.1 and 6.2, can you please leave the meeting now whilst the committee considers the next items on the agenda, and we will be stopping the live stream. Jenny, could you please confirm once that is